9 strange anonymous tips that shook up unsolved mysteries. Whenever authorities deal with an unsolved murder or disappearance, they always hope to receive tips from the public that could help them crack the case. If the tipsters fear repercussions for coming forward, the police will often encourage them to remain anonymous. However, this can add further complications to the case. While it's common for the authorities to receive anonymous tips that turn out false, they can sometimes receive a letter or phone call from an unknown individual who provides important information that sounds credible. In fact, the tipster can even create the impression that they were responsible for the crime. However, since they choose to remain anonymous and refuse to come forward, their information cannot be substantiated. As a result, the mystery continues to remain unsolved. 1. The theft of the weeping woman. Everybody knows who did it, but nobody can agree. That's pretty much the only consensus about the theft of Picasso's 1937 painting Weeping Woman from the National Gallery of Victoria in August 1986. Rumors have swirled around Melbourne in the decades since about who was behind the theft. While the painting was returned 16 days after its theft was discovered, the culprits have never been caught. Victoria Police still considers it a cold case, but could a piece of missing evidence be the key to solving one of Australia's biggest art heists? Weeping Woman was purchased with great fanfare in 1986, for $1.6 million. Due to currency fluctuations, that price increased to $2 million by the time the final installment was paid. Jackson Pollock's Blue Poles, in comparison, was bought for $1.3 million in 1974. Some estimates put the painting's current worth at more than $100 million. The gallery does not comment on the value of works in its collection. An NGV spokeswoman said, "The theft was discovered on a Monday morning, August 4th, when an NGV employee noticed the painting was missing from the gallery wall, with a registrar's card in its place stating the artwork had been moved to the ACT. It soon emerged that the ACT referred not to the Australian Capital Territory, rather, it was revealed as an acronym for Australian Cultural Terrorists after the group sent letters to the gallery and to The Age. We have stolen the Picasso from the National Gallery as a protest against the niggardly funding of the fine arts in this hick state and against the clumsy, unimaginative stupidity and administration of that funding," the first letter reads. It was addressed to Rank Matthews, ridiculing the then Arts and Police Minister, Race Matthews. The group demanded a 10% increase in arts funding and the creation of annual prizes for young painters, and threatened to destroy the painting if their request was not met within 7 days. A later letter ominously contained a burn match. Police searched the gallery repeatedly, including draining the moat outside and searching the art school, which was then part of the same building, as well as a number of artists' studios during the investigation. The painting was returned 16 days later, left in a locker at the former Spencer Street station. "I'm holding out hope that someone come forward and say it was me." Yet items that were stolen with the canvas remain missing. Labels detailing the painting's exhibition history and provenance were not with the painting when it was left in locker 227 on the night of August 20th. According to former NGV chief conservator Thomas Dixon, the labels were encapsulated in clear polyester plastic and attached to the painting's masonite backing board prior to the theft. Neither the labels nor the backing board have been recovered. In his notes from August 20, 1986, detailing his examination of the painting after its return, Mr. Dixon writes, "We have a photocopy of these labels should they be recovered to prove they came from this picture. Presumably, these are still with the thieves." Speaking exclusively to Fairfax Media ahead of the 30th anniversary of the theft, Mr. Dixon, who worked at the gallery for 22 years until 2006, said he wished someone would return the labels and solve the mystery. "I'm holding out hope that someone come forward and say it was me." He said the loss of the labels wasn't a game changer in terms of the artwork's provenance, but they could be crucial in proving who stole it. Patrick McCoy, who was director of the gallery in 1986, says he has no new theories about the theft, yet his comments imply that he knows more than he's letting on. "One or two people who might have known something about it are now dead, who may have been able to cast some light on it," Mr. McCoy said this week by phone from the US, where he is now based. When quizzed about who they may be, he dismisses the names I proffer. "I'll give you my last reflections on this, okay," he says, "and that is, I've always thought there was some likelihood that there was some internal assistance in the theft. I think they knew how to use a registrar's card so it wasn't missed. It wasn't immediately discovered and that ACT could have been seen as the Australian Capital Territory, not Australian cultural terrorists. Mr. Dixon says police investigated a theory involving staff embroiled in a love triangle. I was so shocked when police showed me a letter written by one of my staffers to a love rival. This person's former partner sent them a pretty out there letter, a lot of sexual innuendo and personal accusations, saying, this person could have stolen the Picasso. Neil Holland, a former Victoria Police forensic scientist who now works as a consultant specializing in document analysis, including cultural artifacts such as Ned Kelly's Geraldry letter and Christina McPherson's Waltzing Matilda manuscripts as well as suspected forged paintings, examined the letters and the painting after it was returned. Mr. Holland's analysis of the letters, of the typewriter script, the ribbon and paper used, found that they were from the same source. While he documented the painting and the packaging it was found in, and knows DNA was recovered, he's not sure whether police would utilize advances in forensic technology to solve the case. I'm certain you would have DNA. But with the use of that technology, you don't use it on every case, he said. Probably these days, someone would have to make a decision that this case is important enough to warrant that step of looking at the DNA. When an age photographer went to the gallery on Thursday to shoot the painting, as arranged with the NGV, the weeping woman was missing from the wall when he arrived, as part of routine works, we're told, to be returned to her regular spot on Monday morning. Yet another twist in the endlessly intriguing history of Picasso's painting. 2. The death of baby Parker. 12 years have passed since the remains of a full-term baby boy were found in a railside ravine in Brantford by a woman walking her dog. The July 28, 2005, discovery shocked and saddened the community. Detectives dubbed the unidentified infant baby Parker because his body was found near Parkside Drive, not far from a municipal green space known as Lansdowne Park, where a group of youths is believed to have been partying days earlier. Still unsolved after a decade, the tragic case continues to weigh on everyone involved, and now police hope someone with information will step forward to provide closure. This is a heartbreaking case. The Brantford Police Service will never give up on baby Parker, David Minutillo said Monday. We want to hear from the public, anyone who had knowledge about a young woman believed to have been pregnant during that time, however was never seen with a baby, he said. The mother may not have lived full-time in Brantford, or may have been visiting friends or relatives in the area when she went into labor, Minutillo said. On Monday, police released further details that were held back during the initial investigation. A post-mortem examination of the body, conducted at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, noted trauma to the baby's skull and ribs. There was no evidence of alcohol or street drugs passed on to the baby, police said. In addition, police have released the full text of a letter received several days after the body was found in 2005. Excerpts from the letter, received on August 3, 2005, and purporting to be from the mother of the newborn and providing details of events surrounding the birth, were released at the time. The author promised to contact police again, which then fueled hope that the case would come to a swift conclusion. However, the letter writer was not heard from again. Officers hope that the release of the entire letter will prompt conversations and spark someone's memory. The Brantford Police Service is hopeful that with the amount of time passed and persons' circumstances changing that individuals will now come forward, said Ginst. Nat Lyon. If you were with a group of youths in any of the parks or local hangout spots several days prior to the discovery of the lifeless infant's body, please come forward. You may hold key information without realizing the importance, she said. The author of the letter indicated she had been partying at Lansdowne Park when she started having contractions. At least one other person, possibly female, was involved during the delivery, and that person discarded the baby's body and the placenta, suggesting that person may be more involved with the death of the baby than the mother, police said. Detectives believe that anyone at the gathering would remember being there because of the widespread news of a baby's body being found soon afterwards in the neighborhood. It is also likely that if the mother or friend returned to the park after the birth, they would have had blood on their clothes, police said. It was on July 28, 2005, at about 11:15 a.m., that a woman walking her dog discovered the body of the newborn amid brush and weeds about 20 feet from the rail trail at Parkside Drive and Dufferin Avenue, Near Lansdowne Park, the dog had picked up on a scent and pulled its owner toward the bushes where she made the discovery and immediately contacted police. Also found near the body was a Select Editions brand beige towel made by the Cambridge company and sold only at Walmart. Police canvassed the neighborhood and attended at more than 200 area homes. Numerous consent DNA samples were taken from males and females, which enabled investigators to rule out several persons of interest. On July 29, 2005, at about 7:30 p.m., an area resident approached the police mobile command center to report finding a bloody item near his home on July 25. After learning of the discovery of the body, the resident suspected the item may be linked. Forensics officers seized the bloodied evidence, which was later identified as the placenta matching baby Parker's DNA. DNA testing, conducted in 2005 at a Florida laboratory, pegged the infant's ancestry, a combination of his mother's and father's heritage, at 89% European and 11% Native. Given those results, the lab concluded that both parents would have been Caucasian in appearance. Police worked to track down youths who had gathered at Lansdowne Park on the weekend of July 23 and 24, 2005. The weekend before the body's discovery, parents of young people in the area were approached to give permission for their children to provide mouth swab samples. Area residents were cooperative and officers collected nearly 100 samples at the time. All were tested by the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto, but none had a biological link to baby Parker. On August 17, 2005, an emotional funeral service was held for the nameless infant. Beckett Glave's Family Funeral Center donated a memorial service and burial in Mount Hope Cemetery. In September 2005, police made presentations to teachers at all city high schools and elementary schools in the Whole Meadow neighborhood. They hoped for leads based on a profile of the mother described as being between 13 and 17 years old with some connection to the Whole Meadow area. She may have been absent from school on occasion during May or June 2005 when she would have been 7 to 8 months pregnant. She may have exhibited weight gain, attitude changes or a loss of friends. Detectives also hoped a teacher might recognize the distinctive handwriting in the anonymous letter written sent to police. However, none of these efforts panned out. And, despite dozens of tips and leads received in 2005, the identity of baby Parker remained a mystery. Now, on the 10th anniversary of the discovery of the deceased newborn, police encouraged the mother and friend to come forward and rid themselves of the consuming memory of the event. We need to confirm the circumstances of the recovery of baby Parker and the validity of the individual's story, Lyon said. Detectives know that there are many sides to a story. Please come in and speak with us and help us understand what happened, she said. And 3. The Lyon County John Doe. On March 12, 1992. An anonymous phone call was received by the Nevada Highway Patrol in which the caller stated that he had discovered skeletal remains in a canyon off of Sand Canyon Road, approximately a mile east of Highway 338, near Wellington, in Lyon County, Nevada. Investigators recovered the remains. Bone fragments were found as far as 75 feet from remains. A shallow grave was found near the remains and animal activity noted. The victim's hands and feet were missing. In October 1991, an anonymous caller had contacted the Mono County Sheriff's Department stating there was an abandoned vehicle on Highway 338. This vehicle, a 1979 Pontiac Grand Prix, had not been claimed and was found within 2 miles of the discovery of the skeletal remains. This vehicle was registered to a man in Oklahoma. In October of 1999, this case was reassigned and reactivated. As a result, the owner of the Grand Prix was later located in Colorado and interviewed. A news release was published on October 6, 1999, asking for the public's help in identifying John Doe. As a result of the news release, a woman who lived within walking distance of the remains said a dog used to come around her residence and would leave in the direction of where John Doe was discovered. She claimed the dog had no collar, and provided a photograph of the dog to detectives. Note: law enforcement believes the dog may have belonged to the ad also, because a broken dog collar was found near the remains. The dispatch tape containing the anonymous phone call to Lyon County regarding the discovery of the remains was transcribed, but still offered no evidence as to the identity of the caller. Discussions with a Mono County Sheriff's deputy found that he recalled seeing an abandoned car previously described, and thought the car had been registered to an unnamed man. This man was interviewed with no conclusive results as to whether the abandoned car is related to this case. The Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center is a cold weather training base located in Bridgeport, California, for which Marines throughout the nation attend. The deserter list was obtained regarding this facility for those who deserted during the time period June 1991 through March 13, 1992. All these names were followed up with no leads to the identity of the victim. The lead detective on the case posted a very detailed overview of the case on Web Sleuths. Definitely take the time to read it, and possibly the whole thread. If you're interested in this case, you can read that particular post here. To me, the dog is the most heartbreaking thing, if it indeed belonged to the id. I'm kind of desensitized to these cases, but animals are a massive weak spot, and the picture of the dog just fills me with sadness. Just imagining the poor dog seeing its owner killed and running to nearby houses to try to alert people to their owner's body. But nobody helps because they don't know anything's wrong. The 10-year-old in me hopes that someone passing by saw the dog, saw how pretty it was, and took it home with them. In October 1991, an anonymous caller had phoned the police to report an abandoned 1979 Pontiac Grand Prix. The vehicle was found only 3 kilometers, 2 miles, away from where the skeletal remains would be discovered, but it was never claimed. It turned out the Grand Prix was registered to a man from Oklahoma, who was located and questioned in Colorado in October 1999, but his involvement in the case is unclear. Police were also contacted by a woman who lived in the same area where the remains were found. She claimed that a stray dog often came around her property during this time period. The dog had no collar, but since a broken collar was found at the campsite, it's believed this dog might have belonged to the victim. Neither the dog nor the 2 anonymous callers in this case have ever been found. As the result, Lyon County John Doe remains unidentified, and the circumstances of his death are still unknown. 4. The murder of Maria Kaleo. It's one of the great whodunits in Champaign County history, a murder mystery that's nearly 27 years old and has all the ingredients to fire the imagination. A young, attractive and unlikely victim, Maria Kaleo was a first-year veterinary student at the University of Illinois when she sustained a single stab wound to her abdomen. Found sprawled in the hallway of her apartment building near the campus around 3:30 a.m. on March 6, 1988, the 21-year-old Kaleo died about 2 hours later at Carle Hospital. The trail police followed has never grown cold because it was never hot. Neighbors heard the sound of a struggle and then a struggling victim, but never saw anything that would help investigators identify the killer. Just as the investigation continues, in fits and starts as the years go by, so do news outlets periodically update a story that won't let go. The News Gazette, the Chicago Tribune, even the American Veterinary Medical Foundation revisit the Kaleo case, summarizing the facts, posing the questions and closing with a request for help. Anyone with information about Maria Kaleo's death is encouraged to contact Urbana Police at 217-384-2320. Police Sergeant Dan Morgan is the latest in a series of investigators to work the case. He inherited it from, no relation, Sylvia Morgan, then a sergeant and now deputy chief. The odd thing about this case is that it's kept its legs, said Sergeant Morgan, noting new information that sends the probe off in a different direction periodically is brought to investigators' attention. Even now, Morgan is awaiting the result of a DNA test involving a potential suspect who was a graduate student at the time of the Kaleo murder and now lives out of state. What do authorities know now that they didn't know in the early hours of this investigation? Plenty. They have excluded dozens of potential suspects. But what do they definitively know about the who, the how and the why behind Kaleo's death? Not much. I've tried to keep a thought pattern open to anything because I don't know, said Sergeant Morgan. That there is even a pending Kaleo case is news to many people in the highly transient community of Champaign-Urbana and the University of Illinois. A graduate of Brown University and the daughter of a wealthy suburban Chicago couple, Kaleo was a promising student who loved horses. The day and evening prior to her death were uneventful. Kaleo rode her horse at Osadora's farm. She went to the veterinary medicine school in the evening to study and sit up with a sick foal. She went out with friends about 10 p.m. and returned to her apartment at 305 North Lincoln Avenue in Urbana about 1:30 a.m. The physical evidence suggests she went to sleep. Kaleo was found in bed clothing and her bed looked slept in. From that point, it's a mystery. Neighbors heard noises around 3 a.m. but did nothing. Later, around 3:30 a.m., mortally wounded, Kaleo crawled to a neighbor's door seeking help. Bleeding internally, Kaleo spoke cryptically to police. "I can't believe he did this to me," she said, adding no explanation if she knew her assailant or if, despite her use of the word he, it really was a male. "Experience and common sense seem to dictate we are looking at a male," Sergeant Morgan said. That, however, has not stopped authorities from considering female suspects. One woman, a fellow veterinary student who had differences with Kaleo and subsequently was arrested in Florida, attracted serious attention from investigators. The woman later committed suicide, taking whatever she knew about the Kaleo case, if anything, to her grave. Otherwise, the case is a jumble. Key questions concern: entry. There was no sign of forced entry. Did Kaleo know her attacker and allow the individual inside, or did she leave her door unlocked? Was the person already inside the apartment when Kaleo came home and went to bed? Motive. It's unclear. Kaleo had no known serious enemies. Nothing was stolen, and there was no indication Kaleo was sexually assaulted. However, police say she engaged in an extended struggle with her attacker. The noise they made started around 3 a.m. and it drew neighbors' attention. Wound. Kaleo sustained non-fatal injuries during the melee, but the one-stab wound, a deep thrust from a knife that cut the descending aorta close to her liver, was a fluke in the sense that it hit exactly the right spot to cause death. Suspects. They are anyone and everyone. Authorities have traveled all over the country to interview witnesses, even presenting the case for guidance to a group of 300 super sleuths meeting in Philadelphia. Not one of them put us any closer to whoever is responsible, said Police Chief Pat Connolly, who spent his first day as probationary police officer canvassing Kaleo's neighborhood looking for witnesses. Given the deep mystery surrounding this case, authorities have two cards to play: scientific advances involving DNA evidence and human nature. Somebody is going to say something, Connolly said. People have said something. Several of years ago, authorities received an anonymous letter alerting them to a heretofore unexamined suspect. They're waiting for results comparing his DNA to that recovered by crime scene investigators. Is this the break authorities, as well as Kaleo's friends and family members, have been praying for? Like so many other aspects to this case, there's no definitive answer today. As for tomorrow, hope springs eternal. Today, at 5. The murder of Rebecca Young. On May 1, 1991, a man called 911 and told a Miami police operator that he had just witnessed a horrible crime in the town of Belle Glade, 80 miles to the south. In a rushed, nervous voice, the caller said he was hunting illegally in a sugar cane field, when he heard a car in the distance. The man said that as he ran to hide, a blue Ford Bronco pulled up with two men and a woman inside. One man appeared to be Cuban, and the other Mexican, by the way he spoke. The woman, who was black, called one of the men Ricardito. They argued about what appeared to be drugs and money. When she told them she could not give them the money, they killed her with a machete. The eyewitness told the 911 operator that the Bronco's license plate number contained the numbers 7 and 2. Perhaps fearing for his safety, the eyewitness had waited more than a week before contacting police. He never revealed his identity, but he provided them with enough clues to begin their investigation. The caller said that the sugar cane field was behind a building shaped like a giant ice cream cone. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department sent Detective Dwayne Mayo to investigate. As I was passing along the tree line in my vehicle, I saw a small brown object in the tall grass area. I stopped the car, got out and walked over to the bushes. After I got there, I realized it was the body of a female, but the body was in a state which, at that time, I could not determine which race it was. Crime scene investigator Sergeant Detective Mark Lewis was called to the scene. It was a very heinous crime, very violent. I believe that the killer had a lot of disregard for human life. She had been lying there for approximately a week, maybe a few days longer. She had passed the decomposition stage and had started to enter mummification. Her right thumbprint was the only print left. The majority of her fingers had already turned to skeleton. But with the right thumbprint, we were able to make an identification and prove that she was, in fact, Rebecca Young. Rebecca Young was a 21-year-old resident of Belle Glade. In a terrible coincidence, her mother had also been murdered when Rebecca was just 12 years old. At that time, she went to live with her aunt, Lucille Williams. Rebecca was a very quiet, shy girl. She was the type who would do anything she possibly could for anybody. She was the type of child I would give anything to have over again. Police looked into Rebecca's background and discovered she had become involved with a man known to be a petty criminal. According to Mayo, she had hooked up with a person who had gotten her into a different type of life than she was accustomed to. He started introducing her to the drug scene and prostitution and things of that nature. He had beat her up on more than occasion and had intimidated her and threatened her into that type of lifestyle. Police determined that the man was not a suspect in Rebecca's murder, but believed that his activities may have led to her death. On May 14, 1991, 3 weeks after Rebecca's murder, the sheriff's department arrested a possible suspect. He was a local man who reportedly told a prostitute that he had killed a black woman. When police pulled him over, they suspected that he was drunk or stoned. Mayo interviewed him. He told me that I wanted to talk to him about a murder. And when I told him no, I wanted to talk to him about the prostitute he had been out with, he said, "I don't want to talk to you, I want an attorney." At that point we didn't have any further evidence that he was involved, and I had to release him. Even though the suspect was released, police believed he was somehow involved in Rebecca's murder. But they needed proof, so they searched for the eyewitness who originally called to report the crime. Not much was known about the man, except that his name was Antonio and he said he called from a payphone because he didn't have a line at home. Judging from Antonio's accent, police believed he was born in Cuba. Police were able to find the sugar cane field described by Antonio and discovered the woman's decomposing body. She was identified as a 21-year-old resident named Rebecca Young. At the time, Rebecca was in an abusive relationship with a man involved in criminal activity, but investigators do not believe he was responsible for her murder. Police soon picked up a man who had allegedly bragged to a prostitute about killing a black woman. However, since there was no direct evidence against the suspect, they were forced to let him go. It was apparent that investigators could not make a case against the suspect unless they could track down the anonymous caller who supposedly witnessed the crime. Unfortunately, Antonio has never come forward, and Rebecca Young's murder is still unsolved. And 6. The Disappearances of Tiffany Sessions, Tracy Crow and Beth Ann Miller. Tiffany was a junior at the University of Florida in Gainesville in 1989. She majored in finance. She resided in the 2600 block of Southwest 35th Place in Casablanca East condominiums. Tiffany told her roommate she was going to take a walk along Williston Road at approximately 6 p.m. on February 9, 1989. Witnesses saw a woman matching Tiffany's description speaking to several unidentified individuals in a vehicle shortly afterwards. The woman may have entered the car, but the witnesses were uncertain. Authorities have never confirmed if the person was Tiffany. She has never been heard from again. Tiffany was carrying a black Sony Walkman radio at the time of her disappearance. She left her wallet, keys and identification inside her residence. Michael Christopher Knickerbocker was considered a possible suspect in Tiffany's case for many years. He was sentenced to 5 terms of life in prison in 1990, for the 1989 rape of a 20-year-old Gainesville college student. He had a prior record for sex offenses and other crimes. In 2005, he pleaded no contest to first-degree murder in the 1989 shooting death of a 12-year-old Stark, Florida girl. He was given an additional life sentence for the crime and will be 74 years old by the time he becomes eligible for parole. A photo of Knickerbocker is posted below this case summary. He allegedly told other inmates that he chained Tiffany to a tree near Gainesville on the night of her disappearance. Knickerbocker claimed that he murdered her shortly afterwards and disposed of her remains in the Caloosahatchee River near Fort Myers, Florida. Investigators searched the area after receiving the information from an informant, but no evidence was found at the scene. Authorities stated that materials connected to Tiffany's disappearance may have been lost in the surf as a result of the time lapse. It may be worth noting that Knickerbocker lived near the victim he killed and near the scene of his prior rape, but he wasn't living in Gainesville when Tiffany disappeared. Knickerbocker also mentioned that Tiffany's sweatshirt was buried outside of Gainesville. Investigators searched the specified location in August 2002, and recovered a piece of blood-soaked material. Authorities tested the material to determine if Tiffany's DNA was on the item. The results have not been publicly announced. Several media outlets reported that the material did not appear to originate from a sweatshirt. In 1994, a missing children's hotline received a bizarre anonymous call about Tiffany's case. The caller stated that he or she had seen Tiffany together with Tracy Crow and Elizabeth Miller and that the 3 young women were being held against their will in Austin, Texas and forced to work as prostitutes. Tracy disappeared from Pennsylvania in 1989, and Elizabeth from Colorado in 1983, and no one had suggested the cases were related. The tipster claimed the three women were being held by a man named Thomas Stewart and traveling in a white van with Florida license plates and a blue, gray van with unknown license plates. Police from all three states investigated the tip but decided it was probably a hoax. Tiffany's mother hired Florida-based psychic John Monty after her daughter disappeared. She said that he demanded money in return for his services and never produced any evidence related to Tiffany's case. Monty denied her allegations and professed surprise that she was not pleased with his assistance. He claimed that he gave authorities the name of a prison inmate who was enrolled in a work release program near the Gainesville campus in 1989. Monty said that he believed the individual was involved in Tiffany's disappearance. He also claimed that he recommended investigators search remote areas of the campus for evidence. Monty also assisted Kelly Cox's mother search for her daughter, who disappeared from Texas in 1997. In February 2014, nearly 25 years after Tiffany's disappearance, a suspect was named in her kidnapping and presumed murder, Paul Rolls. A photo of Rolls is posted below this case summary. He had been sentenced to life in prison for 1976 murder in Miami-Dade County, Florida, but was released from prison in 1985. In 1994, he was sentenced on multiple 19 counts including sexual battery, attempted sexual battery, kidnapping and lewd and lascivious molestation. His victim in that case, a 19-year-old Clearwater, Florida woman, managed to escape. He died of natural causes in 2013, at the age of 64, still in prison. Investigators believe Rolls was a serial killer and Tiffany was his second victim. They're searching for her body near the site where his other known murder victim was buried. Shortly after his death, DNA linked him to the unsolved murder of a 21-year-old woman whose body was found in a shallow grave only about a mile from where Tiffany disappeared. He is known to have delivered scaffolding to a construction project along Tiffany's jogging path. Authorities also found a day planner Rolls kept in prison which, while it did not mention Tiffany's name, did have the number 2 written next to the date of her disappearance. The Rolex company has flagged Tiffany's watch, so they will be notified if anyone tries to sell or pawn it. The watch can be identified by its unique serial number. Tiffany's case remains unsolved. There have not been any arrests in connection to her disappearance. 7. The murder of Tracy Ann Patient. This is an old case from my area that has just been reopened. The following is a statement from the local police. Waitman police are following new leads into the murder of a 13-year-old girl in Henderson. This unsolved crime shocked not only West Auckland, but the wider area. Waitman police are announcing this morning that the investigation into the cold case murder of a 13-year-old girl in Henderson has been resumed full-time, with detectives working on new leads. Tomorrow marks 40 years to the day that Tracy Ann Patient disappeared whilst walking home from a friend's house. On the night of Thursday, January 29, 1976, Tracy went to a friend's house in Chilcot Road, Henderson. Tracy was due to be back home at her parents' house in Dalwood Avenue at 9:30 p.m. Tracy's friend walked her halfway home and they parted at the intersection of Great North Road and Edmonton Road at around 9:30 p.m. She set off up Great North Road. The last known sighting of Tracy Patient was outside number 295 Great North Road, Henderson. She was only 5 minutes walk from her home. The following morning, a man walking his dog found Tracy's body in a bush area on Scenic Drive. 13-year-old Tracy had been strangled with a stocking and her body discarded just meters into the bush area. A large-scale investigation was launched and over the following months police looked at hundreds of persons of interest and exhausted numerous lines of inquiry. 22 months after Tracy's murder, November 1978, police received a phone call from an anonymous person, who told police that a signet ring Tracy owned was in a rubbish bin outside a chemist in Avondale. The caller gave the cowtaker the number 126,040 and said he would call back later. Officers went to the rubbish bin and found a ring inside, which is believed to have been the ring Tracy was wearing when she went missing and had been given to her by a boyfriend. Despite more than 850 persons of interest being profiled over the 40 years since Tracy's murder, no one has been identified and charged. To this very day, police have continued to receive hundreds of pieces of information about the case, including theories around the 126,040 number and nominations for persons of interest. Despite thousands of hours of investigative work, Tracy's killer remains unidentified. Police can now reveal that since November, a team of 8 investigators based at the Whiteacre police station have been working full-time on the Tracy patient case. Detectives are following new leads and are now appealing for anyone with information on the case to call the dedicated 0800 number 0800-000-111. Detective Sergeant Murray Free has been on the case for the past 12 years. He is leading the investigation team, with oversight from Detective Inspector John Sutton. In the past 3 months, detectives have made inquiries with a number of people, as far away as Australia. Despite 40 years having passed, someone out there knows who did this. To this day we still have people who ring us with information, and I'm pleased to say we are following new leads, says Detective Inspector John Sutton, Wade Mental Police. For 40 years, the patient family have lived with the absolute trauma of what happened to their daughter and sister. They have never known who took Tracy from them or why. It is still incredibly fresh to them, as if she was stolen from them only yesterday, says Insp Sutton. The West Auckland community remember this well. It was horrific, a 13-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her, just minutes away from home and brutally murdered. Someone out there knows who did this, and we are as determined to solve it now as we were back then, he says. Speaking on camera for the first time ever, Tracy's older sister Debbie has filmed an interview with police to help with our public appeal. The 8-minute video, which is available on the Wade Mental Police Facebook page, will give those who are not familiar with this case some idea of Tracy's story and the catastrophic effect this crime had on an entire family, he says. 8. The death of Waxhead woman. On the morning of August 28, 1981, the Ripon Police in North Yorkshire, England, received an anonymous call from a man who reported seeing a body in some weeds near Sutton Bank. He gave precise directions to the location, and when police arrived there, they found the skeletal remains of a nude woman. She was believed to have been approximately 38 to 40 years old when she died, but the cause of death could not be determined. Forensic tests concluded that she had likely been dead for at least a year or two and gave birth to between 1 and 3 children during her life. Since the victim could not be identified, her skull was used to construct a life-size Waxhead bust featuring her likeness. She subsequently became known as Waxhead Woman. At one point, police suspected that the victim might be an Irish woman named Geraldine Elizabeth Crawley, who had been serving a 3-year sentence for manslaughter at nearby Arkham Grange prison before she escaped in 1979. Crawley seemed to match the victim's physical description and had also given birth to children. When police publicly announced this theory, they soon received a note containing Crawley's signature and fingerprints. This provided conclusive proof that Crawley was still alive somewhere, but she was never actually caught. Investigators believe the key to solving the case might be the anonymous male caller who reported the victim. During the call, he refused to provide his name and said it was for national security reasons. This is the last time anyone ever heard from him. Until this man is found, the Waxhead woman may remain unidentified. To this day, he has not been traced. The discovery of the bones sparked a huge police operation that spread far and wide, even through Interpol, to other countries. Veteran Detective Strickland Carter, now long retired, headed North Yorkshire's SID for 8 years, during which there were almost 40 murders, all of which he solved. But the mystery of who the Sutton Bank woman was, and how she died, eluded him despite an intense investigation, worldwide publicity and thousands of man-hours. So thorough was the inquiry that it successfully tracked down 164 women who had been reported missing. Forensics established the woman was aged between 38 and 40, was 5 feet 2 inches, with dark hair. She had given birth to probably 3 children and had a spinal abnormality which would have given her backache. She had been dead for up to 2 years. After reading an article about the successful reconstruction of the face of an Egyptian mummy, Mr. Carter contacted the Department of Medical Illustration at Manchester University where, working from the skull, experts created the lifelike Waxhead. Hair and makeup were completed by technicians at Granada TV and the finished model was then unveiled to the media. But although the resultant publicity was huge, for what was then thought to be a world policing first, no one came forward to identify the woman. Convicted killer Geraldine Elizabeth Crawley escaped from Ascombe Grange Prison near York in 1979 and had a similar description to the dead woman, but she was ruled out when, following a public appeal, she obligingly wrote to Mr. Carter from her hideaway in Ireland, enclosed 2 samples of her fingerprints and wished him well with the inquiry. Theories abounded, most prominent of which was that she was a prostitute. Then, as now, Mr. Carter had other ideas. "I think it is most likely she was some sort of gypsy," he told the Northern Echo yesterday. "Her teeth were in too bad a condition for her to have been able to work as a prostitute, and I think she was someone who didn't have normal access to NHS dental service." He added, "The whole thing was very sad, and it is still a great disappointment to me that we could never put a name to her." 9. The disappearance of Danielle Lara. On New Year's Eve in 2002, the public service counter at the police department in Vancouver, British Columbia received a chilling anonymous letter. The writer claimed they had sent a message to the police earlier that month about a prostitute who went missing at the end of November and expressed surprise that her disappearance was never reported in the news. Even though the writer did not remember the missing woman's name, they provided a description of her. Then, in a shocking turn of events, the writer admitted to killing the woman but claimed it was not intentional. They asked the police to publicize the case in the Vancouver Sun and reveal the victim's name, concluding the letter by offering a remorseful apology to her family. Police eventually determined that the likely victim was 24-year-old Danielle Lara, who had worked as prostitute in Vancouver's downtown East Side neighborhood for years. Danielle lived a very troubled life of abuse and drug addiction and had run away from home to live on the streets as a sex worker when she was a teenager. She seemed to vanish without explanation in late 2002, and matched the description of the victim in the letter. Even though Danielle's body has never been found, police do believe she was likely killed. At the end of the letter, the writer mentioned bringing flowers to Danielle's grave, but no one knows where this grave might be. Police urge the writer to come forward and lead them to Danielle's remains, but the writer has not been heard from again, so Danielle Lara is technically still a missing person. Police are trying to track down the mysterious tipster who told them about the disappearance of a downtown East Side woman in January. Danielle Lara, a 25-year-old prostitute, has been missing since the beginning of December. The tipster alerted the Vancouver Police Department a month later, but didn't name the woman or leave contact information. Investigators later discovered Lara's identity and suspect foul play may be involved. Police spokeswoman Sarah Blower won't reveal further details about the tip since it's an ongoing investigation. "We're hopeful someone can come forward with information about Danielle. She hasn't had any contact with family or friends since December, and that's why we suspect foul play," Blower said. Officers aren't ruling out the possibility that Lara, a native woman from the interior, has simply moved. Family members did not call police to report Lara missing. The known drug addict was involved in the sex trade before she went missing, working in the downtown East Side since at least November. Contact between Lara and family members has been off and on according to Blower, and it's been some time since they've been in touch, which is not typical behavior. "We were hoping we would have additional contact by the person that originally alerted us, but that hasn't happened. That's why we're coming forward," Blower said. "Perhaps someone has seen Danielle or Danielle herself will call us if she's not in harm's way." Lara is 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighs 125 pounds, has a light complexion, long black hair, brown eyes and several tattoos, including a black heart and cross on her forearm and a heart on her chest. A dedicated phone line for the case has been set up at 604-717-3420. Information left on it will remain confidential. 63 women, many of them prostitutes, have disappeared from the downtown East Side in recent years. Last year, Coquitlam pig farmer Robert Willie Picton was charged with 15 counts of murder in connection with the disappearances. Police, meanwhile, have found Imra Domagos, a 79-year-old who was reported missing earlier this month. Although no statistics are available for the number of missing person reports filed with the department this year, Blower said they're likely to be similar to figures from 2002. Between January and April of that year, 1,424 people were reported missing. Typically, it's about 400 per month. At least 40% of missing persons return home within 48 hours of a report being filed. Usually by month's end, only 2 to 3 files remain open. In the summer months, it tends to rise about 500 to 600 missing persons reports that are filed a month. "We believe that's because of the warmer weather and people may stay out later or not phone their families," Blower said. She added that people of all ages and backgrounds go missing.